welcome to the Teacher Boss Show. My name is Florence Okwasogu, coach for teachers who want to exit the classroom and become the boss of their own life and really thrive. And I'm so excited to be hosting the first ever show of the Teacher Boss Show with a really special guest, Karolina Christoper. So we're going to be exploring in this show the lives of teachers who have made the transition or who are in the middle of transitioning out of the classroom and into entrepreneurship or starting their own business. And the reason why I decided to do this or to do this show is really because I know that when teachers are thinking about exiting the classroom, they're usually thinking of going from one job to another job or leaving one career to find another career. And whilst that's great on one level, if that's not really what you want to do, but feel like you have no other options, I really want to let you know that actually, yes, you do have another option. And that option is you being your own boss, starting something for yourself that really speaks to your values, your passions, and allows you to create a life of freedom and flexibility where you can make an income and an impact on your terms. So, before we introduce our guest, I just would like you to, if you're watching live, just let me know, just say hi, and let me know where you're watching from. Obviously, this is very early in the UK, so you're probably not somewhere where it's the middle of the night or early morning. But just let me know if you're watching live, say hi so that we can both say hello to you. And if you are catching the replay, also let me know. Just type in #replay and let me know where you are watching from. So without much further ado, I'm excited to bring Karolina onto the stage.
Hello.
Hi, Karolina. So
Hi
excited to
there.
have you here.
Yeah, me too. I've really been looking forward to coming on and chatting to you.
Okay, fantastic. So I've got lots of questions ready, but I probably won't be able to ask all of them. So I will be a bit selective about what I'm asking. But I think what I really want to know is what led you to psychotherapy? Because that's what you are, right? A psychotherapist.
Yes, I'm an integrative psychotherapist and creative arts counselor.
Okay, okay. So tell me a little bit about that. What does that even mean?
So, in brief, if you're an integrative psychotherapist, it means that you're trained in different modalities. So,
Mhm.
it's a lot broader than just studying one. So, I work psychodynamically and humanistic existential modalities. So it's quite broad. So that means that I help people look at, how their past has influenced their present, but we also look at the potential of what you can be and where you want to go. And that's the humanistic aspect. And then the existential is even broader because that's about the big questions that that we all face and the life events and the wider questions we might have in life. Why am I here? What's my purpose? What do I really want to do? And then I also use the creative arts therapeutically in addition to that. So in a
Okay.
nutshell, that's what I do.
Okay. So really digging deeply into the individual. That's what it sounds like.
Yes, I think I am that kind of person myself. I really
Yeah.
like, getting to the bottom of things, understanding, making sense, and that's what I've also done in my own life. I've really dug deep inside myself and done that inner work, and
Mhm.
I'd like to help others do the same.
Okay. So fantastic. So you started as what kind of teacher in order to make that shift into psychotherapy?
Well, my degree was in psychology, and
Okay.
then I trained as a teacher, secondary 11 to 18. And during my teaching career, I mainly taught A-level psychology. And so I kind of started off, even before I did my degree. The reason I studied psychology was because, I wanted to have some kind of profession where I could help people. But then for various reasons, I, took quite a big detour into teaching.
Okay.
And along the way, I kind of spent quite a few years as head of department teaching psychology, and it was kind of all consuming in a way. And so that's my path into teaching. And so I stayed in teaching actually for nearly 20 years.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So you touched a little bit on the fact that you really wanted to help people, and that's kind of what led you into teaching. But what's the link then between teaching and psychotherapy? I mean, I know that lots of teachers, when they exit there and they are interested in a helping profession, they might retrain. I know a lot of people that retrain in as a coach or a hypnotherapist like myself. But psychotherapy seems to be the other end of the spectrum where I guess when you hear the word psychotherapy, you're really thinking about some severe emotional well-being issues and mental health issues. So I'm curious to know why the kind of the leap from teaching to something as deep as psychotherapy.
Yeah, and I guess that's often how we think about psychotherapy. We think
Mm,
about mental health and mental illness.
mm,
And it can seem to be a big contrast, but when I think of psychotherapy, I think of emotional well-being
mm,
and how we can achieve that in our lives. And the things that, I think all of us might struggle with at some point in life are just things like depression, anxiety, low mood, low self-esteem. Is the kind of more the emotional difficulties that maybe hold us back on a
yeah.
day-to-day basis. And for me, psychotherapy is a place to explore that together with someone else and make
Mm,
sense of things and make links perhaps with the past. Why am I feeling like this now, and what happened to me? And you can begin to create that life story narrative for yourself, where you've really looked at, where you've been, where you are now, and where you'd like to go. So
yeah.
I don't actually work with, mental illness in that sense. I think that's more the territory of psychiatry. If you're
Mm,
struggling with severe mental illness, that's different, I'd
okay.
say.
So what I'm hearing is that actually um, the work that you do more focuses around helping people to, I guess, thrive and flourish even and address the everyday emotional well-being challenges that we face as being humans.
Yes, and I would say that's often, why people get in touch, because they aren't thriving and they are facing difficult things, in their everyday life. But for me, it's very much about, it's very difficult to thrive if, we have maybe some unhealed pain from the
Hmm.
past, which could be even going back to childhood. That could be different experience of loss, or you know, I work a lot with relational trauma, which is where,
Okay.
you know, there was a disconnect, and you weren't nurtured as a child the way that you needed to be. And those experiences really impact us. And so when we look at how we're feeling now and how we want to feel, I think it's so important to look at what's gone before, what happened to you that
Yeah.
meant that you're struggling now. Quite often we find that the clues are in the past, and if we can make sense of that, it's so much easier to move forward. And that's
So,
why I like, yes.
yeah.
So that's why I like working holistically with the
Mm.
past, the future, and the present.
So as you're talking, obviously we've had our own conversations, and I've been connected with you on LinkedIn for a while now, and I love everything that you put out. It really resonates, and I see a lot of what you write from the perspective of a teacher. And I do have my own hypotheses around um, why the education profession and why teachers struggle the way that they do. And I'm curious to know whether you have your own views or opinions about the work that you do in relation to your time as a teacher.
Okay, yeah, that's a really good question. I think there definitely are links,
Hmm.
and I can only speak for myself because I think everybody's journey is different. But I
Mm,
think teaching is often a place where you have to do a lot. You got a lot on your plate, and it might hook into that part of yourself where you feel that you need to work really hard and you need to prove that you can do something. You need to prove that you're capable and that you're good enough, and
mm,
and you can manage even with perhaps little resources. And there's just some part deep inside wants to maybe prove to yourself that I can do this and I'm capable and I'm good enough. And if I just try a little bit harder, I'll manage better. And that can often go back to childhood experiences where maybe we didn't feel quite good enough or capable enough, and there can be that unconscious motivation to prove to ourselves and others. And of course in teaching it becomes the senior management team that we want to show that we're good enough
mm.
and we can
Such
get those
parent.
results, and we are, superwoman or superman. We can handle everything that's
Mm.
thrown at us with short notice.
So that definitely sounds like a recipe for burnout.
Yes, and I think burnout is really common in the teaching profession.
Mm.
I was certainly struggling with burnout. At least on 2 occasions I had to have time off in 2 different
Mm.
schools. I had to take some weeks off, and I think the main thing in teaching is quite relentless. It never
Mhm.
really lets up. It's just go, 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 and you keep plowing on, plowing ahead, because that's the name of the game, I think, in teaching. It's hard to take a step back and say, actually, I'm not going to do more. I'm not going to, because the stacks keep growing, and it's just hard.
So I think that brings me back to the premise of this show, which is to be your own boss and to really have that autonomy of self, and um, to be able to choose and go in the direction that you want to go. As an integrative psychotherapist, I believe that you're currently working in private practice now. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
I do.
And how does that compare to your experience of being a teacher when we think about all the things that you've just said, um, the work-life balance, the things that are going on underneath the surface that drive us? How is that, how does that compare to your time as a teacher?
So I think a main thing with me is that I like to have systems that work, and I like to feel that I can get behind what I do 100%. And I know the name of your website, I think, is Aligned Flow.
Yeah.
And for me, that's really important. And I do feel that I can create things that I believe in. I created my own system, in fact, for early relational trauma healing. And it was built on exactly the principles that I believed were important to attend to. And when I was in teaching, I felt very much that I quite often disagreed with things. I disagreed perhaps with behavior policies. I disagreed with how things were done. And I quite often, teaching psychology, I disagreed with the syllabus and the and the topics that were taught. And sometimes I disagreed with how we were supposed to teach them. And there was no room for me to change things and do them in a way that I thought would be much better. So one of the things working now for myself is that I can make those decisions. I can decide how I think I can help people best. How I can support them in the best way.
Yeah.
And getting to choose that. And I can choose also the training I want to do and choose my own training. I don't have to go to inset days with training that I feel is potentially not benefiting me. And I can choose my timetable differently as well. And I think also one thing that I hadn't perhaps thought so much about was that I'm quite sensitive to noise and hectic pace. And of course, schools tend to be quite noisy and hectic. And I think those things we just accept as part of the workplace. But I do notice coming out of that environment how different I feel.
Okay. So there's a number of things that you've touched upon. You've touched upon your ability to create the way that you want to create, in alignment with your beliefs and values. You've spoken about flexibility in relation to your time, and you've also spoken about the fact that there's been enhancements to your well-being, even in ways that maybe you had never thought of. For example, with the noise and the chaos of being within a school or college environment. Really interesting. Okay. So why do you think that many teachers might struggle with taking the step to transition into entrepreneurship or starting their own business?
I think, and again, just from my own experience, I think, as I said, teaching is quite all-consuming, especially if you work full-time. And often there isn't much time to stop and think about how you feel and how you'd like to feel and how you'd like to organize your life. it can just be so difficult to stop and have a moment to reflect. And I also think that, I mean, for me, I thought there were many thoughts came up for me, many reasons why I couldn't leave teaching. And I spent quite a lot of time thinking, it's not ideal, but, I can't just leave because I need an income. And also, if I want to train in something else, how do I find the time? And how do I find the mental space and energy? Absolutely, because teaching requires a lot of energy, and then some. So just I guess eking out a tiny little space where you have a bit of an opportunity to just reflect and think about what's important to you.
Yeah,
can be hard.
It always strikes me as funny because teaching is supposed to be a reflective profession, a place where we can reflect on our practice during initial teacher training, PGCE, or however you qualify as a teacher. A big part of that is reflective and reflexive practice. But as you've mentioned, teaching is all consuming. It's go, go, go. And there's hardly time to catch your breath. Definitely hardly time to go to the toilet when you want to go. So I totally understand what you mean by when you say that it's difficult to take a moment to stop. And also the thoughts that you had, I can see that in the many teachers that I've spoken to, the fear thoughts, the anxiety thoughts, especially around income, but also around guilt and shame and not enoughness and failure, that comes with even questioning the idea of leaving such a noble profession and doing something else. And then there's the very real things that you've spoken about, time. How do you find the time to retrain? How do you find the energy to retrain and do something else? And the belief that you can, that comes with it. So I would love to know, how did you answer those questions for yourself, and how did you manage practically to make that shift out of teaching? What did it look like?
And I just wanted to circle back as well to what you said about reflective practice, and teaching being a reflective practice. And I wonder if when we do our PGCE courses, that the reflection is mainly focused on our teaching, teaching practice. How should I teach this topic? How should I, how much group work should I include, and those things. But I think reflective practice is also, how do I actually feel in my role as a teacher? And that became really important to me. And actually there was a defining moment when I started transitioning, and that was actually when because also there's a lesson observations, and I got a really bad lesson observation one day, and I very much felt that the person who had observed me wasn't quite understanding what I wanted to achieve with that lesson. And when I got the feedback, I was really quite shocked, and I felt like myself and this person weren't speaking the same language in a way, because I was focused on the kind of deeper understanding that I wanted my students to gain. And the person who had observed my lesson said, oh, but I didn't understand what they were supposed to do. And there was such a disconnect between how we viewed the lesson. And I really took it quite badly. And I went home and I thought, I work so hard and I really give my best and I really reflect on my students' learning and how I want them to learn. And yet I end up feeling so bad about my efforts and my intentions. And I thought, and up until then, I think I'd been thinking, okay, if I just try a little bit harder, if I just try this, I just do that. But I got to this point where I just felt like really quite annoyed. And I thought, what? And then I came home and I thought, well, what is it that I actually want to do with my life? And I had this kind of bit of an existential moment there. And then I thought back to my initial thought of why I studied psychology, because I wanted to help people, and just helping them learn something didn't feel enough.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started looking into courses in psychotherapy. My first thought was to do an MA in psychotherapy and counselling. And I started dedicating some time then to research courses. And as we've said before, how do you fit it in? And you need to still earn money. And so I found this course, which was called Therapeutic Communication Skills for Work with Children. And it was a course that took place over a year, 1 weekend a month, full Saturday and Sunday. So I thought, well, time-wise, that works. And it was about understanding children's emotional well-being and how to improve it, how to work creatively with that. And so I applied for that. And that was my entry into the new world of emotional well-being and therapeutic support. And so it was a full year, and it was for people who already worked with young people in some capacity, which meant that I qualified then as a teacher to apply. And on this course, there was a lot of focus on the creative arts and personal reflection. And what I was struck by was how much the tutors were invested in the practitioner's well-being. And we had something called reflective practice, but it was very much reflecting on, my emotional well-being. And we had to write journals to hand in. We actually handed in our reflection. And I started to connect with, my own emotional well-being. And all the tutors on that course were actually arts psychotherapists. And I became intrigued about using the arts therapeutically, communicating with children in a therapeutic way. And in that process, I very much came into contact with my own unhealed pain, and I was able to address that. So it was like a healing process for me that I could also then, month by month, I could also implement some of the things that I learned in my existing, workplace, in my classroom. And I started feeling a transformation in my classroom, how my students and I were able to relate to each other.
Wow.
And so, that's how it started. So I still stayed in full-time teaching while adding on a weekend. Yeah. thinking I can do that. I got, because you think if you have the room in your schedule and you can fit it in, again, you may not think about, how much energy do I actually have?
Mm, mm, mm.
So
So,
yeah.
did you feel that it worked out for you to do that energy wise? Were you able to, well, obviously you must have been because you completed the course. But if you were going to do it again, would you still do it in the same way or?
Well, the thing is, actually, it's interesting you're asking, because I've become much more mindful of my inner resources, how much
Mm,
energy I have, and
mm,
what's a wise way of spending it.
mm,
So if I hadn't been so conditioned by the education system that, it's almost a norm to be working to your
busy,
maximum
busy, busy, busy.
capacity.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
busy, busy, busy. I can always fit in something else. I can always
Yeah.
do that little extra thing. Looking back, I might not actually have embarked on it.
But it served you well because it was a stepping stone for you.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you did finally decide to leave, did you go straight from teaching to your new career as an integrative psychotherapist?
No, in fact, it was quite a long process, because I started this course that I've just talked to you about. Is that was in 2013,
Mm,
and then in 2013, in the September, that's when I started my diploma in creative therapy, because, as I said, all my tutors on the first course were arts psychotherapists,
mm,
and they had all studied at the Institute of Arts in London,
mhm,
and I became really interested in that. I wanted to do that diploma in creative arts therapy. And so I negotiated with my head that I could work a 4-day week, and they were able to offer me that. So I studied 1 day a week, and then I worked 4 days a week while I did that course. And then my next step was that I wanted to do an MA in psychotherapy and counseling. So that was the year after. And then I decided to resign and to do supply
okay.
work. So that was my plan. I resigned in 2014. I started my MA, which included a full day a week, and also it included clinical placements. So you had to do your client work
Okay.
certain
Yeah.
days. And so I figured I wouldn't be able to do an MA while being in teaching.
Mhm.
So that's when I started the world of supply, and I ended up working, in fact, mainly in primary.
That's
Uh,
interesting.
and again, this was this kind of thing where I had this sense that, I can go into any school and take any class. I can do this. But of course, it takes a lot out of you,
Mm,
because, energy and mentally. But the beauty of it was that I had my therapeutic communication skills, and so I was then able to work quite therapeutically with the classes I took, and that was something I absolutely loved.
mm.
I found that I actually used my therapeutic skills more than my teaching skills when I was teaching the
Wow.
little
Mm,
ones.
mm.
So it was a kind of gradual tandem with work, study, and also having those relationships with young people throughout.
Mm.
But then I actually I took on another part-time psychology job in a school. I did that twice during my training, because I trained up until 2019. I ended up doing very long training.
Is that normal? Sorry, just to stop you there. Is that normal for training to be so long? So you did your MA. Was that
Yeah.
what you were doing from 2014 to 2019, or was there something else that you did?
No, I did that from 2014 to 16. I did the MA. Then I did
Okay.
the dissertation.
Okay.
And then I decided, just because I like overdoing things, I decided to do an advanced diploma in integrative psychotherapy, which was 2 extra years, which would allow me to register with the UKCP, which
Okay.
is a professional body
For
for
psychotherapy.
psychotherapists, where you need to meet a certain standard. And so I felt like I wanted to go all out and get the highest
Why not?
qualification that I could, because I like to, like I said, go to the bottom of things and go as far as I can and make sure that I've covered everything I can cover. But in that time, I also worked. I took on a couple of head of department roles in
Okay.
psychology part-time.
Mm,
So I was still in the kind of overdoing it mode,
mm, mm.
in fact. And it's only more recently that I've started to slow down a bit and really think about how to actually arrange my day and my time in a way that's sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that overworking thing, I think, was very much an inner motivation that wasn't necessarily healthy.
So, thinking about your journey, what advice would you offer to teachers who are thinking of transitioning?
My first piece of advice would be to really listen to that voice that tells you that there is something deep inside that you want to do, and that's important. To not disregard that, but to listen to that, even if it feels impossible and you're not sure how you're going to achieve it, but to just not disregard that little voice.
Mm, mm,
And secondly, I would say prioritize your health and well-being. If you feel you're being run into the ground, that's not how it's supposed to be, even
yeah.
though it can feel like that, because when we're inside the school environment, that's often the culture.
Mm, mm,
And it can be hard to just take a step back. But you can feel well on a daily basis. You don't have to feel constantly exhausted and, just trying to keep going until the holidays and then collapsing. It doesn't actually have to be like that.
yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else that you would say as a tip or yeah.
Um, yeah, I think, there is a life after teaching, and maybe to think long term, because it's so easy to get bogged down with the day to day. The school day tends to just be so full, and then before you know it, it's Friday, and then there's another week. So maybe think long term where you might like to go, and just think what could be the first step, what could be a first small step that I could take so that I could have that sense of fulfillment that's in alignment with that voice inside that's telling me what I want to do. So just start small.
Yeah. So
But
important.
yeah,
So important. And from listening to you, I definitely feel that that's an area that you could potentially help teachers with, tuning into that voice, stopping, listening, acknowledging, relating. Um, and
yeah,
also, you've mentioned before about the dynamics, the relational dynamics, and that's a big part of what you do. So, am I right? Would that be something that you could help teachers with?
yeah, absolutely. Because I think I know so well what it's like to be in that situation, and I've got my own experience of transitioning out.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing I'm also passionate about, which I might mention as well, is emotional well-being in
Mm-hmm.
schools,
Mm-hmm.
and trauma-informed schools. And that's another thing that I would like to develop as well in my practice, to
Mm.
go into schools and talk about trauma-informed practice and therapeutic communications in classrooms.
So I'm just aware that our time is getting on. So what I would like to do is just share your website, just in case people want to find out more about you, and they want to get in touch, have a talk with you about how you might be able to support them if they, if they are feeling like they need to stop and pay more attention to that voice inside of them. So thank you so much for your time today, Carolina. It's
Well,
been such a great honor for you to share your journey with us. It sounds like it did take a little bit of a while for you to make that transition, and you haven't left education behind, and I think that's important point to be aware of, because we don't have to leave education behind if that's not what we want to do. I guess
no,
sometimes we feel like, I didn't work as a teacher, or, my teaching experience was so traumatic or so difficult. I want to run as far away as I can from it and do something else. But if you've still got a heart in that direction, there's no reason why you can't have a positive impact, but you can get to choose how that positive impact looks like, which is what you've done, and that's fantastic. So,
yeah, I think that's so true. And I think I always loved teaching, but it was
mm,
just gradually, there were so many other things around it that just it became difficult to focus on the teaching because there were all the other things that took up so much time and energy
yeah,
in that
definitely.
environment. So yeah, well, thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed talking to you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, people have got your website details, and I just want to share before we go about um, the Alive to Thrive waitlist. So this is something that I put together, Alive to Thrive membership community for teachers who want to make that transition from teaching to becoming their own boss. There is a whole mindset behind it. It's not just about making that decision. There is a whole, and probably you can relate to this, Carolina, there's work that goes on inside of us for us to step into what it means to become our own boss and allow ourselves to thrive. And so this membership community is a space for teachers who do want to become the boss of their own life and to really thrive and be surrounded by like-minded teachers who no longer want to be a slave to the job and create a freedom lifestyle on their terms. So you can find the information for that on the screen at the moment. And if you have any questions for myself or Carolina, please feel free to leave a comment and we will come back round and reply. Thank you very, very much, Karolina, for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
Um,
so much.
you're welcome. So I guess that's we'll end it there for today. And if you're watching this either live or the replay, please do join me next time for another guest on the Teacher Boss Show.